Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of Eastern Area Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Graham Pask, Chairman of the committee. Other members of the committee present are Councillors Graham Bridgman, Tony Linden, Alan Macro, Jeff Mays, Richard Somner, Joe Stewart and Keith Woodhams. I have the following officers in attendance to advise and support the meeting. Bob Dray, Team Leader for Development Control, Gemma Kirk, the Planning Officer who will present the item that we are to consider this evening, Sharon Armour, our Legal Advisor, our Solicitor, Paul Goddard on Zoom, who is our Highways Development Control Team Leader and can assist us with highway matters, and Stephen Chard from Democratic Services, who is also our Zoom host. Now, before we start proceedings, I would like to explain for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching. I know there is quite a lot of public interest, of course, in this. I see 11 people are tuned in to us as I speak. That tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present and COVID compliant in the council chamber. I can confirm that those present in the chamber are sitting socially distanced and are thus permitted to remove their face masks whilst seated. Representatives making a presentation to the committee have been encouraged to do so remotely via Zoom. There is no one, I believe, actually in attendance, although you would have been equally welcome. The meeting is now being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings and indeed to listen to the meeting afterwards. Do members here have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Members, I would remind you at this stage that if you wish to speak, please indicate by using your Zoom hand. And I think when it comes to any vote, I would look for a show of hands clearly at the appropriate time, please. Item 1, do we have any apologies?
Yes, indeed, Chairman. Apologies received from Councillors Alan Law, Royce Longton and Ross McKinnon. The substitutes in attendance are Councillor Joe Stewart, Councillor Graham Bridgman, and we are expecting Councillor Nasser Hunt to join us as well.
Okay. Members, item 2 are the minutes, and I will apologise that they were distributed slightly later than usual, not with the agenda. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that there is a slightly different format in that in the past, members, when they question officers or make presentations, are actually named or have been. I can ask Stephen Chard to make a comment if you so wish, but it seems to have been decided that at the moment they will be it isn't a verbatim record of precisely every word that was said, and never has been. I believe personally, having read the minutes, that they are a true and accurate record, but I seek your guidance and advice before I ask you if I can accept them as that. But Councillor Bridgman, do you wish to make any comment in that you were one of the first eagle-eyed councillors to have made a comment?
Thank you, Chairman. I find it useful personally to know who asked a question. And I think that's the practice in other committees. If questions are asked in other committees, they tend to have the name of the member asking the question assigned to them. The reason I find it useful is because, of course, you then look for the questions you are minuted as having asked to ensure that that minute is accurate. If it's much easier to remember whether or not you think that minute is accurate if the name goes with the question than if it doesn't. You're then scrabbling around trying to remember who asked that question, was it you, and does it accord with you? Because you might think, well, that wasn't the question I asked, and then you discover it wasn't you who asked it in the first place if you're not named. So I find it useful to have members' names against questions, but I'm prepared to go with the flow if others don't.
Well, an interesting comment, one with which I concur and understand your sentiments. Perhaps at this stage, as we have what I believe are, and I ask for your guidance as to whether you consider these to be a true and accurate record of the last meeting, whether I can sign them as a true and correct record, and perhaps we could enter into the debate about the actual format.
Sorry, Chairman, if I wasn't clear, I think, and I was in the meeting, as it happens, I was subbing in that day, and I think they are an accurate reflection of what happened, even though they don't show who asked specific questions.
So, members, can I share? Oh, Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the first item was at Oakingham House. I did speak against the application. I supported the parish council when they complained about the view of the building from Tidmarsh Lane. And said in my own experience, I had noticed the building as it was standing out quite significantly. And I was against the application for that reason, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I recall the debate in question, Councillor Macro. Do you feel that they do? Yes, I take your point. Perhaps with that amendment that you did, even if and I will seek advice afterwards, if I may, in making this meeting as expedient as possible, as to how we do that, whether you're named or whether a councillor said. Is that satisfactory? Councillor Woodhams.
Yes, Chairman, thank you.
I'm grateful. Yes, indeed, there are names put in there in terms of the actual debate. It is just a question. Councillor Bridgman, do you want to come back?
Chairman, yes, I was simply going to say in support of Councillor Macro that, of course, in the debate section, we do have named members. Therefore, it wouldn't be necessary for the minutes to reflect that a member made the comment under the debate. It would certainly be Councillor Macro, and I think there should be a minute there to reflect what Councillor Macro has just said about his contribution to the debate.
Okay, point is well made and point is taken. I will ensure that is put in. Subject to that amendment, may I sign the minutes as a true and correct record? Show of hands, please. That is all of you. Thank you very much. Members, declarations of interest, and I, for one, as I'm sure others may wish to declare that one of the speakers from the parish council, Mary Bedwell, is well known to me, as her husband, of course, was a long-standing member of this authority. But I don't consider it to be a prejudicial interest. I'm merely asking you to note that I do know this lady. Those of you who also know her, perhaps you could indicate by a show of hands. Councillors, all right, that's virtually everybody, apart from Keith Woodhams. So Councillors Somner, Stewart, Macro, and Jeff. Okay, right. And, oh, sorry, Councillor Linden, I beg your pardon. So would you please note that declaration of interest? Members, are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Somner?
Thank you, Chairman. Can it also be noted that I am a member of Holybrook Parish Council? However, that will not deter me from taking part as normal.
Is there anyone else? Councillor Woodhams.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to declare that I've been lobbied by an objector and noted. Thank you.
Well, indeed, Councillor Woodhams, I have too, and one gives assistance where one can, as far as that goes, and perhaps if you'd note mine as well, please, Mr. Chard. Anyone else? Councillor Linden?
Yeah, I've also faced the same issue.
You have?
Chairman, I suspect we all have.
I suspect. Yes. I suspect we all have as well. Yes. Can I take that as a blanket declaration? Right, members, thank you. We therefore move on to the application, which is for 3 Goodwin Close in Calcutta. And I ask our planning officer, Gemma Kirk, to introduce the report, please.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share the presentation. Okay, thank you very much. So good evening. The application for the committee tonight is 21004884 full at 3 Goodwin Close. Sorry, the presentation's just being a bit slow. Sorry about that. So the application seeks to change the use of a dwelling house to a residential care accommodation. The item is at committee tonight due to the level of objection and the recommendation for conditional approval. The residential care home is intended to provide care for 3 children between the ages of 8 to 18 and cared by staff on a rota system. The home proposes to provide care for children with learning difficulties. It is intended during the day for one-to-one support to be provided. It is proposed to have the following staff: 1 manager, 1 deputy manager, 4 support staff with 2 working at the property during the day at one time, and 1 waking staff member. I've included a slide with the definitions of the existing C3 use and the proposed C2 use. So the proposal is not considered to fall in with C3B, which is not more than 6 residents living together as a single household where care is provided for residents because of the staff arrangement. So the use falls within use class C2. In terms of the change of use, the material difference between the C3 use and the C2 use is the number of staff and that the staff are not permanent residents and are on a rota basis. So 3 Goodwin Close is located within Holybrook, a residential area within Calcott. The suburban residential area is formed of several cul-de-sacs and interconnected footways. The location plan shows that Goodwin Close is accessed by Carter's Rise. There is a footpath to the north and an area open space. And to the east is an existing footpath that runs down the side, and to the south is a garage block that serves the residential properties of 23 to 23 Goodwin Close. These are existing floor plans, and the next slide shows the proposed floor plans and roof plan. So the application doesn't include any external or alterations or extensions to 3 Goodwin Close, which is shown on these plans. During the course of the application, we sought amendments to address concerns raised in objections with regards to highway safety and creating a safe environment. So these amendments are shown on the proposed site plan, which include retaining the garage for storage purposes, hard surfacing the front garden to accommodate additional parking spaces, and a 1.8 metre closed boarded fence along the east boundary, which is this green line here, and the south boundary. The planning history and procedural matters are outlined in the report, and I'll move on to the consultation now. So we've had consultation responses. These are detailed in the report. We've received objections from the Parish Council, Highway Authority, and the Tree Officer recommended conditions. And we did receive originally an objection from Thames Valley Police. However, the amendments were considered to be appropriate, and the Thames Valley Police objection was related to design grounds. We have received 89 objections during the course of the application, and the major issues included unsuitable location, impact on the character of the area, impact on neighbouring amenity, fear of crime, parking and highway safety, drainage, national and local policy compliance. Contributors considered that the original objections were not addressed by the amendments. I will now address the main issues for consideration. Firstly, the principle of development. The full assessment is provided in the report. However, I will just refer to policy C1 that states that homes should be retained within a residential use unless there is a reasoned justification in the form of a benefit to the wider community. The change of use would result in the loss of 1 household in terms of housing supply, as the children are not permanent residents. As the children are the permanent residents. We consider the loss of 1 house is outweighed by the social benefits of providing residential care accommodation. Current national and local policies encourage mixed and inclusive communities. Overall, there is no objection to the principle. Secondly, the character and appearance. I've put a photo on the front of the property. So the property itself will not be altered by the proposal. The considerations for the character and appearance are the hard and soft landscaping alterations and the compatibility of the use within the residential area. So we acknowledge that the current landscaping at the front of the site has a positive contribution on the suburban character of the area. I just got the second image showing the existing front garden. On site, it was pointed out that the residential properties within the vicinity predominantly had green boundaries and areas of grass, which all had a positive contribution. Therefore, we are seeking, by way of a condition, a soft landscaping scheme to be submitted. As per the update report, we considered that with the changes to the parking arrangements and the landscaping could all be retained. This could include the retention of a hedge and potentially the cherry tree. We considered that the use of a close bordered fence to the east boundary and retaining the wall is acceptable. Close bordered fencing is commonly found in domestic settings and not considered to alter the character of the area. We acknowledge that by using free Goodwin Close as a children's care home, that there would likely be an intensification of the use, and this is due to the staff being on a rota system. However, it is understood that the intention is to replicate that of a family dwelling house. Therefore, the use would be similar to that within the use of a Class C3. It is considered that due to the scale of the operation, it would not significantly alter the character to the extent that it would be incongruous to the area. The next consideration is neighbouring amenity. The main consideration with this is, again, the kind of intensification of the use and the disturbances to residents. The property is detached, which assists in reducing the potential for undue disturbance. That one again shows the relationship with the neighbouring properties. The efforts are proposed to reduce disturbances from traffic movements, and we have recommended a condition for shift changes not to take place between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. to reduce potential overnight disturbances. It was considered on balance, the intensification will not have a significantly harmful impact on neighbouring amenity. So the majority of objections raise concerns with regards to crime and antisocial behaviour, including how this will impact on the social cohesion in the area and increase in disturbances. We acknowledge the concerns raised by residents on this matter and have taken them into consideration. We know areas of significant concern are the footpath to the east of the site, as shown on the photo on the slide, behind the site where the garage block is, the open spaces within the area, including the one opposite the site, and others accessible by the footpath network. We recognise that Thames Valley Police did originally object to the proposal. However, this was on the grounds of the design, including natural surveillance and creating a safe, secure and accessible environment for the children. The amendment secured, including the removal of the office and the boundary treatments were considered to be appropriate by Thames Valley Police. We considered that there is a good natural surveillance for the footpath and the fence proposed would still maintain a clear line of sight down the footpath and therefore would not be creating a unsafe environment. We recommend conditions are applied for the fence to be provided in accordance with the plans and a condition for the garage to remain as storage space, and also conditions for details of formal surveillance as requested by Thames Valley Police. Whilst we considered residents' concerns, we considered that we could not attach significant weight to this consideration because we have insufficient evidence to substantiate an objection on the basis of crime to warrant refusal. Again, this is a view from the footpath at the rear of the site. So Paul Goddard will, after this presentation, address the highway considerations. So I will leave those. The next section of the report refers to kind of permitted development. So we have requested a condition to restrict the use to a children's care home for 3 children between the ages of 8 to 18. This is the use that the application has been assessed on, and we consider that a different C2 use may have different considerations, and therefore we've requested that permitted development the use is restricted to that stated in the information provided. Other matters. So in the report, a summary of the issues we've already provided a summary on the issues that have been raised. The update report addresses the refuse storage, which was an issue raised after the report was published. We're recommending a condition for refuse storage with details to be provided before the first occupation. In conclusion, it is recognised that there has been a significant amount of objection on the main issues covered in the report. We considered that acceptable development can be secured by the use of conditions. Therefore, in the planning balance, we consider the benefits, in particular the social in this instance, outweigh the impacts of the development. Therefore, we were recommending conditional approval.
Thank you, Gemma. Mr. Goddard, do you wish to state the highways points on the agenda at this stage? You're nodding, so please could you present?
Yes, please, Chairman. I think that would be useful. The highway section of the committee report starts at page 15, and the planning officer, Gemma Kirk, to her credit, has lifted basically all our responses to the report. I think it shows the level of detail that your highway officers did go into in assessing this proposal, considering from a highways and traffic point of view, this is a relatively low-key proposal. The existing use of the property is clearly a 4-bed dwelling, and we would suggest that probably normally 4-bed dwellings generate up to 8 vehicle movements per day, 4 in, 4 out. There will be an increase in traffic with this proposal, and we accept that. However, I think the increases are, in our view, too small to support an objection. Within the report, we've taken details submitted with the planning application, supplied by the applicant and their agent, and I've no evidence or reason to doubt what they've submitted. For instance, on page 16, you've got the shift changes there, and the vehicle movements associated with the youngsters, and we've tried to represent that all in a easy to look at table, which starts at page 16 and sort of spills over onto page 17, and it includes what we think will be the parking demand there. For much of the day, there will be 3 staff on site. And we expect that 2 to 3 cars would be brought associated with them. We've included vehicle movements for the children. We understand that a single vehicle will collect them in the morning and take them to education and bring them back in the afternoon. We've also got some out of school activities in the evening, and perhaps they would have appointments to visit special care specialists, etc., when required. Staff, 3 shift changes expected. The table has been overtaken a little bit by events because of condition 8 that Gemma Kirk mentioned just now, which prohibits shift changes between 2200 hours and 0600 hours. So that table will change a little bit, but the applicants and their agents may elaborate shortly, but I would still expect 3 shift changes to take place. The biggest shift change occurs sort of mid to late afternoon, when you'd have 2 or 3 cars arriving and 2 or 3 cars leaving. That has caused concern amongst some people. However, I wouldn't expect 2 or 3 cars to arrive in convoy and then 2 or 3 cars to leave in convoy. I would expect the changeover to take place a bit more gradual than that. And even if it did all occur at once, I would suggest that any disruption would perhaps be for a very limited period of time, once a day. Certainly not enough, in my point of view, from a highways point of view, to object. Moving on to parking, and I don't know, Gemma, if you could perhaps put on screen the parking layout that you showed earlier. But obviously that table just show the parking demand there, and we've got 3 spaces plus a 4th space, which we believe would accommodate any shift changes. That parking layout is not the finished item, and I would refer you to condition 5 of your report. The layout still needs to be a bit more work with regards to surfacing, with regards to levels. And I don't think that fourth space needs to be like that. In that sort of tangent, I think it could be lined up alongside spaces 2 or 3 that would then ensure protection of the much of the hedge there and the trees. We are looking to widen the access a little bit into the lay-by, into what we call the taper of the lay-by. I don't know if you could point to where the taper is, Gemma. That's it, that area there, where no vehicle parks. So it's not going to result in the loss of any parking. And that would provide a driveway that's some 8 meters wide. So certainly sufficient for the activity that we would expect with this. So there will be an amended parking layout as per condition 5. So we've no objection from a highways point of view. And I would remind members, as in paragraph 111 of the National Planning Policy Framework, that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be a severe impact. And I must advise that that bar of severe is very high. And I would advise that this proposal is nowhere near being severe in our view, and therefore your highway officers recommend no objection. And at this point, Chairman, I'll pass you back to the planning officers if they have anything further to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. I'm getting shakes of head saying no. Members, if you have any questions for officers, as always, please note them, because very often when we go through those wishing to make their representations, your questions are answered. I know, as I said before, there's a lot of public interest. I think there are some 40 observing this on YouTube, plus the 11 we have on Zoom. So without further ado, could we ask councillors Mary Bedwell and Claire Tull from Holybrook Parish Council to be brought in to join us, Mr. Child?
Yeah, they are both with us in the Zoom room, Chairman.
That is excellent. Could I, before we go, ask Gemma if she could stop sharing her screen? Then I can see everybody. Wonderful. All right. Councillors Tull and Bedwell, very good evening to you. I see Councillor Tull. You have up to 5 minutes to share. Can I assist you with any timekeeping? I have my stopwatch at hand. Can I tell you if it's halfway or with a minute to go? How can I help you? Please don't forget to unmute when you wish to speak.
I think Mary wishes to speak first.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Mary Bedwell, if you could unmute. Councillor Bedwell, you're still muted, I believe.
No.
Oh, that's it. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can I assist you with any timekeeping?
Well, what is going to happen, I'm going to do the first 2.5 minutes, and hopefully Councillor Tull will complete the objection on the second 2.5 minutes. Is that all right?
That is absolutely fine. I will tell you when 2.5 minutes is up. And if I could ask both of you to stay on, please, for any questions members may have for you, which is, of course, in addition to your 5 minutes. So your time starts when you start speaking.
Right. Good morning. Good evening, Chairman, officers, members, ladies and gentlemen. Holybrook Parish Council is in accord with the 89 residents who have objected, and we strongly oppose this application. There appears scant scrutiny of the build and form of it to ensure suitability for the proposed function. The built environment for special needs depends on need. One size does not fit all. Asperger's requires a different environment to autism or severe learning difficulties, for example. There is no such accommodations within this proposal, such as the very basic consideration to make the bathroom and WC suitable for assisted use. The material consideration for disabled persons' access, as stated in the Council's SPG, has been completely ignored by officers and omitted by the applicant. To state that access requirements will be considered as and when is contrary to the Equality Act. The proposal is therefore not inclusive. Children's Services have not provided any compelling evidence that change of use of 3 Goodwin to a commercial care home is strategically vital to their service. Relevant movements to and from the premises associated with C2 use must be properly considered, including shift patterns, visitors on regular basis, or access by the emergency services. These factors will impact negatively on the amenity of immediate and adjoining residents. Specifically, the home proposes to cater for children with learning difficulties and who may require one-to-one care during the day. That makes 2 shifts of 5 if the manager and deputy are also carers. The trip table shows 3 staff twice per day, Monday to Friday. Please note, weekends have not been included. No visitors to the property are shown: tutors, healthcare services, Ofsted, family, etc. A realistic trip figure is more like 32 trips, not 24. This is not typical of a family household whatsoever, and is a real change in character of the dwelling through increased comings, goings, and disturbance. The inter-household movements to shuffle cars many times a day is not on balance acceptable. The concerns of adjoining residents have not been afforded a fair and equitable consideration. The significant loss of amenity and long-term harm to our established community is not acceptable. Councillor Tull will now finalise the objection.
Well, that was well timed.
Thank you. Well-attended site visit ably demonstrated that fundamental material considerations have been omitted or glossed over, and the recommendation for approval is not sound. The child demographic has been changed to special needs. They will not be walking to school or hopping on a bus to Thiel Green. They will be tutored on site or taxied to a special school. This means more cars parked, more vehicle movements, and the trip table is biased and understated. There is no swept path analysis. The car shown parked at 90 degrees is not possible. The drive is significantly lower. This critical topographical detail is not shown on the plan. To build the drive up to meet the current lawn level would block the entrance to both the garage and the house. You would not get in the door. It is not acceptable under any circumstances to have cars double parked in front of an entrance door to a care home. The drive gradient is approximately 1 in 12 and is unacceptable for disabled persons' access with or without assistance. It's also a negative slope. To create the car park as specified, the tree and hedge that you say must be kept will be wrecked. Moreover, extending the drop curb will encroach on the lay-by, a provision that serves many residents. In fact, these modifications and changes to the grounds negate and destroy all of the previous positive aspects. The conditions by officers and police demonstrate quite clearly that 3 Goodwin Close, as it stands, is unsuitable for change of use from family home to commercial residential home. The fact that the police objected and then demanded surveillance to deter crime confirms the residents' belief that risk of crime and antisocial behaviour is a reality and would be avoided if this application is refused. The report refers to policy CS4, which is for new build. Should this proposal have been presented as a new build, it would have been rejected from the outset. This proposal falls well short of the professional standards expected and should be rejected.
3 seconds ago, I'm very impressed, ladies. Well done. Members, questions for the Parish Council? I'm looking for Zoom hands. We can let them off that lightly. It appears that we are. Last time? No, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We now have 2 objectors. We have Angela Anderson and Melissa DeJogo. Are they in the room, please, Mr. Chard? Oh, I see Mel. Right.
Yes, Chairman, they are now in the room.
They are. Ladies, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. What about We can't see you, but that's your privilege.
Can you hear me? It's Angie.
Right, yes, we hear you.
Thank you.
Can we have a sound check on Mel as well?
I am here and you can see me.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, same rules of engagement. You have up to 5 minutes between you to address us. How would you like to share the time? Can I assist you with any timekeeping?
We intend to go for 2.5 minutes each.
Okay.
I will go first, and we have timed, but we should be within time.
Okay, well, I'll give you a 2.5 minute reminder. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And please remain there for any questions members may have after you've spoken.
Yeah. Shall I begin?
Please do. Time starts when you talk.
Regarding the boundary wall, when the matching wall at 1 Goodwin Close came down and we had a temporary fence in place, we received a letter from the planning team, West Berkshire Council, insisting that the wall must be rebuilt in the same material and style as for 3 Goodwin Close. Otherwise, it would materially affect the character and appearance of the street. Putting a fence behind the wall would mean the boundaries no longer match. That would cause an imbalance, which detracts from the character and appearance and will look really weird. Having a fence there won't make the property any safer because of the metal railings in the alleyway. From the age of about 9, I used to climb into my garden using these, and you would have seen from your site visit that that side of the house is unobservable. You could remove the metal railings, but they are there for a reason. You can add CCTV, but what does that actually achieve? Staff won't be watching it 24/7, and CCTV doesn't prevent crime, as we see from the daily videos posted on social media of antisocial behaviour and theft. Why were the police even asked to give a response to the planning application? Just by asking clearly shows the planners are concerned with the increase in crime. None of the suggested actions will reduce the crime or allay residents' fears. You're trying to solutionise and mitigate when the truth of the matter is there's an alleyway there, you can't ignore the concerns or plan the way out of it. The fear of crime is a genuine fear. It is a fact the crime rate will go up as proven by every other residential children's care home in the UK. Research into Ofsted regulated children's homes has found there are safeguarding issues. Children in these settings are vulnerable to exploitation by people involved in crime, including drug gangs. We don't want drug gangs in Goodwin Close. We don't want antisocial behaviour, damage to property, graffiti, being intimidated. In regard to vehicle movements, highways-based average movement on a 4-bed house. This is a 3-bed house. The 4th box room is not legally a bedroom. The staff changes at 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. every day. That's disruptive and disturbing for residents and goes well beyond normal movements. Every evening, 10 p.m., just as you're settling for sleep, car doors slamming, engines revving, people talking, and then the same at 6 a.m. before you're due to wake up. Completely unacceptable. Angie, over to you.
We, the residents of Goodwin Close, have obeyed our deeds, ensuring that our properties are not used otherwise than a private dwelling house or for any purpose or in any manner which shall or may be or grow to be a nuisance, annoyance or cause damage. The same covenant applies to number 3. This change of use is against the law. The council's original planning permission for the whole of Ford's Farm states that, following the completion of the development, no further commercial or industrial activity shall take place within the site. How can the planning officers in their report state that the change from C3 to C2 remains similar to a family home when in excess of 7 staff are to be employed on a daily basis, each drawing a salary? The care home is to be a commercial business with local authorities paying the applicant a large sum for each child's place. This is a commercial transaction. The enterprise is for gain, therefore a commercial activity and against the council's own rules. CCTV installation will impact tremendously on the 6 properties that border number 3. These properties all have young children and all the parents are concerned about the invasion of privacy. The alleyway alongside number 3 and the wall will mean that the cameras will have to be sited at a high level, impinging on the privacy of the surrounding gardens. The alleyway is accessible from a hidden part of the garden. This is not secure and safe. There are alleyways and open areas in close proximity which young people could congregate in. With the increase of vehicular movements and parking 4 vehicles on the driveway, where will emergency vehicles park? Should an emergency occur during the night with 1 member of staff, there is no backup should a child need to be accompanied to hospital. One car will be trapped by the 3 on the drive. It will be tempting for this vehicle to drive over the pavement and lay-by to leave number 3. Having worked for 17 years in special educational needs, in my professional opinion, this home does not offer safe and secure facilities. Looked after children with special needs usually stay for short periods of time. The clientele changes frequently and may be moved from their home area over concerns for their safety. The turnover will be high. Continuity of staff and residents will be compromised.
30 seconds remaining.
The applicant's belief that suitably qualified staff will live within walking distance is misplaced. The applicant has established tenants in the property. Their child attends the local school, and when they started to rent, they were given reassurance from the applicant that the rental would be long-term. Approval will likely make them homeless.
Right, thank you very much. That's again a wonderful example of timing. Members, any questions for our objectors? Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chairman. Reference has been made to, in both presentations from the parish and from objectors, to access for emergency vehicles. Now, I will obviously ask planning officers, but my perception is that if I owned one of the properties along this road, I could, if I wanted to, take down the front fence, take down any hedging at the front and drive my vehicles onto my lawn and park my vehicles in the front of my house. Now, if I can do that and anyone can do that, how can it be said that emergency vehicles wouldn't be able to access me? If I called an ambulance, I would still expect to be able to get out of my house, out onto the road and meet paramedics. So I'm asking the objectors how they say that emergency vehicular access is somehow denied by this or any other development along Goodwin Close.
Who wishes to answer that one?
Can I answer that, please?
Yes, please.
The two cars immediately to the left of the garage are double parked, and in double parking, they actually impinge on the entranceway into the front door. So they would have to move those 2 vehicles in order to get a stretcher or a patient chair into the door, which is at a tight left angle, which then goes into a right angle in over a raised threshold. So the access is actually very restricted if there are 2 vehicles parked alongside the garage.
Councillor Bridgman, do you wish to go back on that and ask a supplementary?
No, I hear the answer.
You hear the answer. Members, any other questions, please? I see no more Zoom hands. I'm looking around just to make sure that there are no physical ones. Ladies, thank you very much indeed. Not unsurprisingly, there are no supporters wishing to speak. So we turn to the applicant and agent. The applicant, Mr. Hussain, and the agent, Mr. Windress. Gentlemen, can I be told when you're in the room, please?
Yes, Chairman, both gentlemen are in the room.
Right, let's do another sound check. Can you hear us? Mr. Windress, can you hear us? I believe you're both muted. If you could unmute, it would be helpful.
Sorry, yes, just resizing. Yes, I can hear you, thank you.
That's brilliant. Mr. Hussain, can you hear us?
Hi, Mrs. Hussain, yes, I can hear you.
Mrs. Hussain, I do apologise. Right. Again, being very consistent as we always are, you have up to 5 minutes to share between you. Can I assist you with any timekeeping?
No, that's fine. I think I'll go first. I hope to be quite brief anyway.
Okay, that's excellent. And could I just remind you both, please, to remain with us to see if there are any questions after your presentation. Your time starts when you start to speak.
Thank you, Chair. As I say, I do aim to be brief because the officer report and the presentation today has been very clear, very detailed, and has addressed all material planning considerations, including all relevant national and local policy. The Highways Officer has addressed a number of the comments that have been made by the objectors and the Parish Council. And again, that's our material considerations and as clearly stated why the application should be supported. As has been detailed in the report, following the revisions and the requests that were made by officers and the technical consultees, changes were made to the application with respect to the parking, the boundary treatment and the CCTV, all at the request of officers, and the applicant's been able to accommodate those. So that's something that we're happy to see further conditioned and addressed again in more detail. And I do agree the landscaping around the front garden certainly can be retained. It's important just to note that the point in the report with respect to children's services and their support for the application, and stating that this is a very suitable area for this proposed use. In respect to some of the comments just that have been made, the deeds on the title, I'm sure the legal officer and planning officer will be able to confirm that that's not a material planning consideration, but a civil matter, and that is something which the lawyers acting for the applicant have confirmed is something which can be comfortably addressed. With regard to the accommodation itself, clearly I'll let Shamim deal with some of those matters, but again, they are examined more so through other legislation by Ofsted and others. And I'll pass over to Shamim. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Got just under 3.5 minutes left.
Thank you. Just like to say that, we're going to deliver high quality care for children. There will be an assessment carried out, a risk assessment, environmental area, neighbour assessment and matching assessment. So the children that we will be placing, we will look into the environmental area, the neighbourhood area, and we will do a risk assessment to make sure they are compatible towards the neighbour area. The other thing someone said was about the CCTV. This is hosted by Thames Valley Police. We will monitor our location and not the neighbourhood. Stickers and signs will be displayed on the property to notify any potential visitors. This will comply with the GDPR surveillance and monitoring policy in place. The other thing someone was saying about fear of crime, there's insufficient evidence that the proposed development will result in more crime. The children will be supervised one-to-one whilst attending the community. There are lots of positives to the home in that the vulnerable young people will be given a loving and nurturing environment to thrive in and can create some positive friendship groups for the children in the area. The young people predominantly will need not be a disruption at all, but support to learn and grow as individuals into the community.
Okay, have you concluded?
Just hold on a second.
Yes, absolutely. You've still got a couple of minutes left.
Okay. Just to say, special needs children are given education placements. There are no facts it will cause any long-term impacts as you are providing high quality care for the children. We are. I think that's it really, to be honest. And the staff on shift, there will be enough staff to manage the needs of the young people, and there will be enough room for an emergency vehicle to park if needed. I think that's it, to be honest.
Right, okay, well, let's see if members have any questions. Members, I have Councillor Stewart first.
Thank you, Chairman. And a question for Mrs. Hussain, if I can. We've heard previously about accessibility of the facilities, both accessing the building and also about the accessibility within the building as well. I think I heard you say, and I just want some confirmation, I think, that the children that might be placed in this facility, you will be assessing their need. And therefore, I would presume that would mean that anybody that was placed in the home wouldn't require additional accessibility means.
Yeah, we assess them on a need-to-need basis. And as I said to you before, we will look at the environment and the neighbourhood to make sure that we can actually meet the needs of the children.
Okay, lovely. Can I ask another one? Thank you. Also for Mrs. Hussain, there's quite a lot of information here about parking, and clearly there's a lot of concern about traffic movement. I think it was the parish council mentioned whether visitors had been factored in. And I wasn't sure whether you would be expecting family members to be visiting the children. I don't know if that's the way the facilities would work, but it would be good to understand that as to whether that would be additional parking and traffic movements.
That would be dependent on the individual need of the child when the assessment is carried out. It could be they might not need to visit the home. We can visit them at a cafe. They can go anywhere else. It depends on what the child particularly wants and how safe it is for them. So it all depends on the situation.
Okay, but there could be a possibility that there would be visitors coming to the house, and that could be whether it's family members, friends, but they wouldn't be specialists or staff. They would be coming to visit the children themselves.
I mean, they don't need to visit them. I mean, we can always meet them at a cafe, or we can meet them at the library. There's always ways and means of either being adaptable, to be honest, and changing.
Okay, I understand that. What I'm trying to address is that there are concerns about residents are saying that they think there may be additional traffic movements. So are you saying that there won't be visitors coming to the house because they will be visiting elsewhere? Or are you saying that there is a possibility that there could be visitors coming to the house?
Well, we would look at this being limited impact at the house. That's what I'm trying to say. We wouldn't make if they don't have to visit the house, if they don't need to. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. In which case, Chairman, I think that what we're saying here is there could be visitors to the house.
Well, that is not another question you can ask of officers later as well. You've had the applicant's answer or an answer. Councillor Macro, can I ask for your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got two questions, really. One is, I get the impression from reading the report that children will be transported to schools using, obviously, in a vehicle. I assume that will be an additional vehicle, such as a minibus or something. So I'd like confirmation of that. The other thing is, I was wondering if children, residents of the home, go to, say, a local park or go for a walk, will they be accompanied by a member of staff at all times, or would they be able to do that on their own? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the car, we will have a car for them, but that would be one car. And the other thing is with the staff, I'm going to encourage my staff to either go by car share, walk, or go by a bicycle, or park the car far away so there's no congestion at the house. That's one thing. The second thing that you're saying about the park and the walk, the staff, they will have one-to-one all the time whilst they're out in the community. So they won't be by themselves, the children.
Right, Councillor Macro, are you happy with that answer?
I didn't quite.
I didn't either. I would. If you have a supplementary, please ask it. Otherwise, I will.
Hear the last couple of sentences.
Sorry about that. I'm saying that the staff, when the children go out into the community, the staff will always be with them one-to-one in the community.
Thank you.
That's what I thought you said as well, and I would have clarified, but you've got your answer. Is that it, Councillor Macro? Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to follow up one of the aspects of Councillor Macro's question, am I correct, therefore, in understanding that it is expected that the children who are resident will attend school of one kind or another during the day?
Yes, they will.
Okay, so if I can just take that and then just investigate the hours in the table that is on page 16 of the pack and the proposed condition about hours of access and egress, in other words, shift patterns, because there seems to be a contradiction, if I can put it like that, between the two. In the report, and indeed it was mentioned by our highways officer that the report was somewhat affected by what he was saying. We have a number of proposed traffic movements, and we have very specific shift patterns in paragraph 6.42 of the report. So we have 0800 to 1600, 3 members of staff, a manager and 2 support staff. Now, if the children are at school, during the day, I'm trying to work out what the 3 staff members are doing, because that affects movements, access, egress to the property. Then we have from 1600 to midnight, 3 staff members, midnight to 0800, nighttime, 1 waking night staff member. Now, the proposed condition must change those shift patterns, because it means there is no shift movement between 10 and 6. And yet, according to this, between 10 and midnight, you'd have 3 staff members, and after midnight, you'd have 1 staff member. Now, that must mean a change of shift. So I want to understand, if the condition is removing that, exactly what the shift patterns are going to be. And I'd just like to bottom out this question of staff and school.
Would one of you like to attempt that answer, particularly the school one and the change of the condition that is being proposed with a 10 o'clock as opposed to a midnight handover?
Certainly, I'll just briefly mention something, and I'll let Shamim explain a little bit more about the shift patterns. But through the 8 months that this application's been running, there has been some subtle changes in the application, as we've talked about the boundary treatment. More recently, the officer has talked about the conditions which they would like to impose. So that table has been lifted from some earlier documentation that we put in with the application. That's slightly evolved as the application has gone on to meet the requests of planning officer, highways officer, that sort of evolution. So that's how that's come about, and why there's some slight subtleties. Even just this last week, we were asked about changing a shift pattern from what was going to be 10:30 changeover to 10 p.m, which was fine. It was not a material change, and they've been taken on by Shamim and her colleagues. And I'll let Shamim expand a little bit further on some of the rota and shift patterns.
So the plan is for all children, if they are entitled to education, and they so rightly should go to education, you know, so they're no different to any other children, because they will be going to education. The staff during the school hours would have them at home, or, you know, it depends, because if the children are at home during term time, the staff will have them at home. So according to the shift patterns, we'll have to have a look at the rota and see. I can't answer you that question, because I'll have to look at the rota.
So I think obviously that those shift patterns in the report cover weekends, cover school holidays, cover children which won't be going to school. So there is a bit of a mix there. So there clearly will be some movement at 8 o'clock of either staff arriving or children going to school around that time, and likewise at the 3-4 p.m. time. But that will depend on the children which they brought in, which are suitable to this accommodation, to this area, and then also the staff associated with that, in addition to the time of year.
Chairman, if I can come back on that, I don't understand that answer. I don't understand how the shift pattern we've got in the report can be weekends and half term and holidays if there is a condition that you can't have a shift changeover between 10 and 6 and 10 at night and 6 in the morning. I don't follow how you can have such shift patterns if there's that condition.
So that's the older shift patterns which were put in with the application at the time of submission. So this was the information given to us from the applicant. We put this information in. That element of the report has been copied from the earlier planning statement. However, recently the planning officer has requested, could you change your shift patterns to meet this condition? Is that something you can achieve? And we've said yes. That is something, the condition that we're comfortable with.
So it's confirmed there won't be any shift changeovers between the hours in the condition?
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's what the officer said, and indeed, Councillor Bridgman, you have the opportunity to question officers after this to get to the bottom of it, so to speak. Councillor, oh, sorry, have you completed your questions?
I had one other question, which was just to follow up something that Councillor Stewart asked, just to absolutely be to understand that at the moment there is no plan to make adaptations within the house for accommodation of the children.
That's true.
Right, that's true, we're told. So you can come back later, Councillor Bridgman, if you need. Councillor Mays.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. if I could ask Shamim, do the staff during the daytime, do they undertake domestic cleaning activities, or are they solely looking after the children?
They'd be solely looking after the children.
So do you have domestic staff in addition to those which are currently in the proposal?
I've got no idea. Hold on a second. Are you saying in the proposal for?
Well, during the day, you've got people or staff looking after the children,
Yeah.
whatever their age is, and you also got a house which will require cleaning and other processes. Are they additional staff that will come in?
No, I mean, if the staff, if the children are at school, the staff can do the cleaning. It's not a big issue.
Right, thank you. That's one point. So there are no extra staff coming in to do domestic chores in the property?
No.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from any members? Sorry, Councillor Macro, I think that's a legacy hand, as they call it these days, is it not? Okay.
That's my legacy.
And your excuse as well, Councillor Mays. Right. Members, any new members or any members who have already asked, wishing to ask any further questions? Right. Thank you both. We now come to the ward member, Councillor Somner. You have up to 5 minutes, and of course you're here, so we can ask you questions afterwards. Councillor Somner.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I will be brief on this, but I did want to give residents a slight explanation as to my actions this evening. So I won't be going into the usually experienced citing of pros and cons. Up until very recently, we were a two-ward member. Sadly, my fellow ward councillor passed away earlier this month, and therefore I'm left with a situation where I felt it would be better to take part in the debate, and that's what I will be doing. I've taken the time to therefore listen to residents and all other conversation this evening, Chairman, and I will continue to take part in the debate later on with the intention of representing as I see fit. And that's all I've got to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Right, but I still have to ask members if you have any questions for the ward member. Saw someone move a hand, but it wasn't going up. No, okay, we understand your position, Councillor Somner. Thank you for explaining it to us. Members, before we move on to debate, that is, we do have, of course, the opportunity to explore any other the aspects that have been raised tonight or that you have thought of since our officers' presentations, either planning or highways, or indeed both. So I'm in your hands. Who wishes? Are there any questions for our officers? I see Councillor Bridgman. I believe that is a new hand.
It is indeed, Chairman. I'd just like to explore with officers what an applicant for this property in C2 could do regardless of planning permission. I understand they need planning permission to move from C3 to C2, fully understand that. But I just want to explore some aspects of the application to understand what could or could not be done under permitted development. The three things I'd like officers to address are the height of an external fence, changing the nature of the front garden from grass to block paving, as is proposed. I mean, I would say that I would like to see that permeable, but that's another question. I note the flood question, but I still like to see permeable solutions put into driveways. And finally, removal of trees, bushes, whatever. So in other words, if there was no planning permission, what could an owner of this property do without planning permission? I take on board that to change the profile of the front garden with a fresh dropped curve requires planning permission, rather, so the drop curve aspect requires planning permission, I believe, but I'm just asking about the other aspects, Chairman.
Right, I'm going to ask Gemma to take that first of all, and I'm sure Mr. Goddard is on hand to answer any of the highways issues, including the drop curb. So, Gemma.
So under permitted development, height of an external fence, if it's not adjacent to a highway, is 2 metres. If it's adjacent to a highway, it's 1 metre in height. You can do under permitted development.
Can I just ask, sorry to interrupt, but can I just ask whether a footpath is counted as highway or not for that purpose?
There is a definition. I think I have to quickly look at that.
So I'll double check. Off the
Yeah.
top of my head, it's that vehicles pass along. I'll check during the debate and come back to you.
So with regards to hard surfacing, for a householder, there is permitted development rights to hard surface. Again, there's conditions related to that, related to drainage, and then removal of trees and hedges, because they're not TPO trees or in a conservation area, they wouldn't require consent to be removed.
Next, I have Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard from the Parish Council and from objectors concerns about the suitability of the house for children who may well be disabled. Will they need to get any kind of permission or licensing from any other authorities before they can open it as a children's home, please?
So there are a number of pieces of legislation and guidance that are non-planning that relate to the sector, including the Children's Act 1989, the Care Standards Act 2000 and the Children's Home Regulations 2015. And as the applicants mentioned as well, there's Ofsted regulations, they're regulated by Ofsted as well. So there is separate matters to planning.
And those would be checked by Ofsted, would they, or by the local authority?
I know from the information I found, Ofsted do the regular inspections. That's what I can advise on that.
Chairman, if I may, Children's Services said the vast majority is Ofsted.
But before I come to Councillor Mays, Councillor Macro, sorry, is there another question from you at this stage? Councillor Bridgman asked a technical highways matter relating to drop curbs. Mr. Goddard, can you just explain, do drop curbs just require a licence or are they subject to planning?
That is my understanding, Chairman, because Goodwin Close is unclassified. It's not the A4, it's not the B4000 or anything like that. Because it's unclassified, all they would need is a vehicle crossing licence to widen the access should they wanted to do. They wouldn't need planning permission, and I stand to be corrected by my planning colleagues, but that is my understanding.
And would that normally be subject to consultation, or could someone apply and virtually almost automatically get it, this licence? Yes. They could?
Yes.
Mr. Dre, do you wish to add anything about Mr. Goller did ask you to come up with any planning issues. Are there any to the best of your knowledge?
Just to clarify, that is correct. Where it's an unclassified road, it's permitted development normally. And just to come back on Councillor Bridgman's question, I've looked up the permitted development rights for fences, and it's 2 metres adjacent to a highway used by vehicular traffic. So it would be permissible all the way around here. Thank you.
My knowledge grows ever more, Chairman.
We always learn something at these meetings, don't we, Councillor Bridgman? Sorry, I'd say Councillor Mays. I meant to say Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Mays. So Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chairman. My first question I would address to our highways officer, because it's a continuation of my question around visitors to the property. And I think my assumption, my conclusion from what we heard was that there could be visitors that may come to the house. I'm not entirely sure that we were definitive in that regard, but I think we ought to presume that there could be. So for the purposes of the calculations that have been done, and I appreciate this is an estimate, that there would be some 18 to 24 vehicle movements per day. Have visitors been included in that calculation?
No, they have not been included because of documentation that was submitted by the planning agents back in April. and I quote, appointments to see medical specialists and care support services are generally taken off-site and do not involve personnel travelling to the property itself. You mentioned family visitors. None of that's ever been mentioned in any of the documentation, but I don't consider it unreasonable to assume that there may be relatives visiting now and then. If they did visit, my conclusion would be that the number of visits would not be sufficient to change the overall recommendation. And I would take the view, well, all the properties also in the street would also have visitors, families, relatives, etc. And therefore, why wouldn't this property have something similar, perhaps?
Thank you.
Okay, that's right. Councillor Mays.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My 2 points I'd like to raise are both for Paul Goddard. One is, I assume that there is no gate across the new wide entrance where the 4 cars would be parked. And the other one is, I assume that the 3 cars on the left of the drawing would actually completely impede the entrance to the actual property itself. Am I correct on that one?
Chairman, from the plan that you saw earlier on, parking spaces 1, 2, or 3 are existing. They're already there. And such a layout is replicated around the rest of the close. And it's quite normal to have parking in front of the front door. But I envisage that there would be sufficient space either side of a car parked for visitors to walk to the door, in my view.
Okay, happy with that answer, Councillor Mays?
Yeah, but I don't agree with it.
Well, that's your privilege. You can make the point in debate. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of technical points for clarity. And these may sound like silly questions, but you know me, I'm going to ask them anyway. I'd like to know what the view is on the covenants on the deeds, because I think that's been discussed as to they can easily be dealt with. I just want confirmation that that is the case, please.
Sorry, covenants on
the deeds of the properties across the estate.
Yeah, covenants are not typically material planning considerations. The granting of planning permission would not alter them in any way, and vice versa. So, yeah.
Thank you. And my other point, if I may, Chairman, please, is it's an expansion to the nth degree, I suppose, really, from Councillor Bridgman's initial point with regards to what can or cannot be done within this classification. Am I right in recalling that you said, despite the list of possibilities within this class, that this can only be used for the prescribed use as per the application? Therefore, hospitals, etc., that are listed within this class are not possible without further application.
So we've recommended a condition for it to be restricted to 3 children at the age of 18 to 18 years old in residential care accommodation. So they would have to apply to change the use to nursing home, hospital, anything else within Class C2.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Linden.
Yes, Chairman, I just want just to inform you that that chat is being used, and as members we can't look at that, and if you could make a comment, Chairman.
I think you've already made the comment, Councillor Linden. I mean, I know that people are putting things up, but they have their 5 minutes in which to make their case. Are there any further questions for officers? I'm on a bound, although I think I know the answer, to ask Mr. Child if any members have phoned in, which I think is a negative.
Correct. No one's phoned in.
Right. In that case, we have concluded the questions and answers.
Councillor Bridgman.
Oh, Councillor Bridgman, sorry, I beg your pardon. Have you got your hand up again? Or is that a...
I do have my hand up again, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify something following on from what Councillor Sumner just asked.
The floor is yours.
Chairman, you may recall an application a little while ago when I argued about a planning condition that was seeking to be removed and asking the question, well, why was it imposed in the first place if you could then apply to remove it? So I want to just explore the question of what I understand, and I ask officers to comment from those, I think from the parish, possibly from the objectors, about general conditions over all of the properties as they were built on this estate and the relationship between that and commercial. The idea that a housing estate was built and there were conditions applied to blanket conditions applied to remove the question of commercial from that housing. So I just invite officers to comment on that general position. I know there's an answer specific in the update report about a particular planning permission and saying quite rightly that of course one can apply to remove, but obviously the question I think from the members of the public is why do you impose conditions if you then allow people to apply to remove them?
Right, who wishes to take that one? Mr. Dre?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as Councillor Bridgman points out, we have addressed this in the update report under section 3. So I'll read that out for the benefit of anyone who doesn't have it in front of them. There is a condition on the original consent for the estate, which says, following the completion of the development, no further commercial or industrial activity shall take place within the site. And what we said below is this condition restricts such uses taking place without planning permission, but it does not prevent an application being made for such activity. It's akin to when we take away permitted development rights as a precautionary measure. It's so that any detailed proposals could come forward for scrutiny under an application rather than just going ahead anyway. Any such application would obviously need to be considered on its merits, as you know, and as such, we had the view that this condition doesn't have a significant material bearing on the consideration of this application. Not to say that the considerations aren't still relevant. In our report, we've obviously given our view on the character of the area, the impacts on amenities, those same considerations. I suppose in response to why do we put conditions on, and then I suppose circumstances will change. There are the tests for conditions. It's got to be necessary to grant permission and reasonable. I think it's clear that the intention with this condition was to protect the residential amenities of the area, but I suppose there's a wide range of potential commercial industrial activities that could take place. There's also changes in policy, and in the time this estate's been around, that obviously there'd be quite significant changes to views about mixed communities, mixed uses, stuff like that. So circumstances change. But whenever we get an application, we have to consider on its merits at the time.
Helpful, right. Councillor Somers has a new question you have.
It is, Chairman, please. I'm just interested, and I haven't spotted it, so apologies if I've just not seen it, in the comment on page 8 from Children's Services, and I don't know whether officers are able to confirm without going into specific detail of addresses. It does state that in terms of location, the proposed children's home is relatively close to 2 existing children's homes run by a different company. How close is close, please?
Right, can either of you assist with that question?
I'm sorry, we don't know the exact locations of the children's homes that are existing. It was just guidance that Children's Services provided with us when we were questioning about the need, but I don't know the locations of the existing homes.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. I'll pick that up in debate.
I'm still looking for questions. Are there any more? Otherwise, I'm looking for someone to start the debate. I see no more hands go out for questions. Who wishes to start the debate? Well, someone has to. Councillor Somner.
Go on, I'll take the pressure off you for once. This is quite a difficult one for me. The reason I asked my last question is I'm fairly certain I recall somewhere fairly close, actually, to this location being used in, if not the same, a very similar way. And I suspect that is a large part of residents' concerns. And I can understand that concern. I think it's difficult for the sort of area that we're talking about to recognise a change in this fashion. I think if you look at the properties around that area, actually that end of the estate in particular, I would say is probably quite sought after, if I'm honest, and I live on it, and I've lived on the estate for a long time. So this is a difficult one for me. I absolutely hear what the residents are saying, although I can see where children's services are coming from with a need. But it would have been useful to know where those other places are, to be honest with you. I'm very much on the fence at the moment. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got councillors Stewart and then Macro initially. So, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I'm in a similar position. So I disagree with some of the comments about not needing this type of facility. And I know that from speaking to and working with colleagues in children's services. And I totally understand why you would want to place children with any sort of learning difficulty in a home environment, because it is better for their well-being. I'm also slightly disappointed that we assume that because children have learning difficulties, there's going to be crime connected. And I think that is one that needs some really hard thought. But having said that, the traffic movements, and I haven't lived in the area quite as long as Councillor Sommer has, but I do know the area very well. So I have been there over 20 years and I've seen it develop and grow. And in fact, the property that was mentioned, number 1, is a reasonably new addition to that street. So there has been an increase in traffic and parking. And in fact, the residents told us that at the site visit because of that property, apart from anything else. And some of the photos that we saw, and I don't know what time of day they were taken, but you could already see that there were vehicles parking on the pavements, which of course restricts access for any pedestrians or anybody needing to use those pathways. And for me, 18 to 24 vehicle movements per day, if I live next door, and I appreciate that this is that these are detached properties, but they are not that detached from each other. That sounds like quite a lot of vehicle movements to be living next door to. So I could understand why the neighbour might be quite concerned about that. So hence I'm in a little bit of a split position. I understand the need. I think from listening to the applicant, there is clearly some thought that has been put into this, a lot of thought and planning, but I am still concerned about the traffic movements and the parking.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Councillor Macro.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I did share some of the concerns of the parish council and the residents initially, but I think that they've all been addressed. I think one of the big concerns was the possibility of antisocial behaviour, but we've been told that children will be accompanied by an adult or one of the staff members if they actually leave the house to go to the park or the playground or whatever. We've heard about concerns about the suitability of the building, particularly internally, and also the entrance. But officers have told us that the building will have to be passed by Ofsted, or at least inspected by Ofsted. So I think that that's been addressed. Regarding traffic movements, and parking, fairly close to where I live, and almost next door, but one in fact, there is a care home for 6 adults with learning disabilities. And so there's although it's adults rather than children, there are a lot more residents and a lot more staff. When I walked past it yesterday, there was one private car and the minibus that they use. So I think a lot of the staff there arrive by public transport, and the bus service in Thiel is nowhere near as good as it is in Fords Farm. So I think that addresses that one as well. The only issue that I've come across with that particular care home is the issue of rubbish and recycling, which they generate quite a large amount. But we've now had that addressed in the update report, I think, Mr. Chairman. So I think I'm inclined to agree with this application, and I'll be making a motion if you wish, in the future. Thank you.
Right, well, I note you haven't now, so let's continue with the debate. Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Chairman. Having lived quite close to this area, but a sufficient distance to participate in the debate, I live on the south side of the A4. I certainly have noticed since I moved in November 1983, that, or was 84 anyway, one of those years, that there are people with learning disabilities who have been living in that area quite clearly, and they've been exercising with support. I also note that the 26 bus service is very, very regular in the area due to its vicinity to Southcote. It is also very close to get to. Within a slightly longer distance, there's a #1 service from Newbury and Thatcham. So there is a fair amount of public transport in the vicinity as such. I do share the concerns of Councillor Stewart in terms of vehicle movements near the site, though, but I think we need to look at it on planning requirements. A few of the concerns met by residents are not really planning systems, and there are certain things that need to be done elsewhere. But overall, I think we do need to look at it on planning as such, Chairman. Thank you.
We are indeed a planning committee. Therefore, that's incumbent on us, stating the obvious. Councillor Somner, is that a new hand?
Yes, it is, Chairman.
Well,
Thank you.
Councillor Somner.
Just a couple of points. Well, I mean, to be honest, I'd written one of them down anyway, but just to pick up on a couple of points that Councillor Macro made. With regards to the Ofsted inspection, of course, that's after the event. We've got to make a decision before Ofsted come in and make any decisions about what can or can't be done or what needs to be done. So whilst it will be a requirement, it doesn't actually carry any weight in this conversation because it's not going to happen yet. And the other, and again, and I'm not picking on children's services, honestly, I'm not, but it's another statement that they made. And it does tie in with the statements just made by Councillor Linden and Councillor Macro. The bus service is not only regular, it's every 10 minutes and it goes both directions on the same road. And that road is only the space of the two houses that were built on that first corner plot away. So in effect, you've got a bus going past every 5 minutes. Anybody who thinks that road is not busy needs to go and sit there for a little while, because it is. It's the main feeder into the estate, and it carries a lot of traffic in and out. It's far from quiet as far as I'm concerned. And again, I live on the estate. I see it. I hear it. So, yeah, I'm not content with the statement that says that the location is away from busier roads. It isn't.
Okay, thank you. I note two hands. Councillor Macri, you had a go. I will come back to you. Councillor Bridgman, you haven't. So let's come to you next.
Thank you, Chairman. And indeed, I know the area reasonably well, having a little while ago lived just up the road for about 13 years. Chairman, I have some great sympathy for the views that have been expressed. As with many planning applications, and indeed the comments that are made on them, a lot of the objections fall away when one looks at permitted development rights and so on and so forth, to establish what they could do anyway, what the applicant could do anyway, despite what is said about paving and fences and trees. Those things, as I hope I've established, could be done anyway. So it really, we come down to the core question of change of use from C3 to C2 and whether or not this is the right place for it. Well, I guess my response would be that there is never a right place for these things. One has to work with what one's got, and one has domestic accommodation. And the question is, I think, then the balancing act between the need of the council and of society generally to accommodate children in a safe environment and the views of the community in relation to that need. And I do think there is a need. I agree entirely with Councillor Stewart that there is a need for children's accommodation, whether it's in this area or any other. And on balance, I think that I come down on the side of the need displaces the views of the other residents. I do take on board the question of vehicle movements. I think that has been largely addressed by the condition about shift patterns and about timings of change of shift. I would like to see us as a council, not this application, but generally say that if you are digging up grass and putting hard standing down, it's got to be permeable. I don't like the idea of block paving, which is not permeable. It doesn't matter where it is, and it doesn't matter what flood zone it's in. So I'd like officers to answer a question as to whether a condition that required permeable paving or whatever it was on the front garden was acceptable. But that aside, I am minded to support the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you. We can come on to that just if it aids debate further about permeable paving. Mr. Dre, can you assist, or perhaps Gemma? Just let her look up what she's written again.
So we've asked as part of condition 5 for hard surfacing materials. We have noted that there has been concerns about drainage with it being a hard surface area. So we have said we require details of hard surfacing materials. Can we change it to permeable?
Well, can we change it to
if there was a
permeable?
proposal, you could stipulate that specifically. It is permitted development too, that it has to either be under permitted development, it has to either be permeable or drain within the site.
And that's precisely what I was thinking about, having recently had that discussion with Mr. Dre.
Councillor Macro again. You did have your hand up. Is it? Have you taken it down? Sorry. Oh no. Okay.
Councillor Macro, can I suggest you stick your mic on? Otherwise, those watching won't be able to hear you.
People can hear you much better with the microphone, quite frankly. Sorry, I'd like to propose officers' recommendation with the addition of the additional condition 11 as in the update report, perhaps a change of wording to condition 5 to insist that the surfacing should be permeable. Though I should add, I believe I have been told that block paving is regarded as permeable, but I have doubts about that myself.
I was under that impression too, but let's not get bogged down in that detail. I'm not foreshortening debate, but I've had a proposal, which means, do I have a seconder?
Chairman, I will second, since I have made that my position clear.
You have. So I had a proposal, I've had a seconder. Before I go to the vote, are there any other points of debate you wish to enter into? It appears not. Therefore, we have a proposal for officers' recommendation of approval with the addition of, as on the update sheet, refuse storage pre-commencement condition number 11, and whether block paving or not is permeable, but under condition 5, it should be permeable, whatever is put down. Does that make sense, officers?
Yes, thank you.
Those in favour of that recommendation, please show. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against, 1, and I will abstain on that one. The conditional permission is granted. Before you go, ladies and gentlemen, we have to. I'd just like to talk to you later about potential applications coming up. That does conclude the business of this committee, but the next meeting is on the 17th of November, which would, with the normal way in which we work, it means site visits. Bearing in mind it's going to be dark at 5 o'clock in that after next week in the morning of the 10th of November. If you could note that in your diaries, but please could I ask you to remain here until the meeting is closed. Thank you, Mr. Child.
Yes, the live stream